Over, that's not bad. And good evening, it is February 26, 7:08, calling this meeting of the Stow Board of Selectmen to order. And I will begin, as we always do, with public input on any matters that are not on our agenda. I see anybody? No, nothing. Okay, Chairman's comments. Just a couple of really quick things I want to note for my friends on the board. I've been talking about the Stow Citizens Police Academy. I went to the first meeting of the Stow Citizens Police Academy. It was absolutely terrific. I am really impressed by what our officers have done with this curriculum, 10 full weeks. It is really something, and they ought to be commended. I also want to remark on the passing of a very important citizen, David Warren Smith. He was 94 years old. Mr. Smith fought in World War II. He was in the Army Air Forces. He was from 1943 to 45. And between 1959 and 1974, he served the town of Stow in several capacities. He was a member of the Board of Selectmen. He was a Finance Committee member. He was on the old Board of Fire Engineers. And he was the school bus contractor for Stow and later the Nashoba Regional School District from 1947 to 1975. Many of you probably know Mr. Smith. He is the father of Jeff Smith, insurance adjuster at Warren Insurance, and the husband of Betty Holly of Stow, and a good friend of Penny Garsick, who many of us know. And I wonder if we could take a moment of silence in his memory. Thank you. All right. And I think our first, let me take care of the liquor licenses. So we have two special liquor licenses, license requests. And the first one I've got is for the Nashoba After Prom Committee, Julie Fish. Yeah, sure. Right out here. Introduce yourself.
Hi, Julie Fish.
Tom Ryan.
Hi. Kathy Castle.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Kathy Castle. Hi.
Kathy and Jim.
Castle.
Sally.
Hi, Kathy.
Nice to see you,
Ryan.
David.
Hi. Yes, still in the back. Same name. It's for a fundraiser for the after prom, not the actual prom.
Oh,
That scared me. I
that
want to
actually makes me feel a lot better.
Prom in
So-
March.
I had that
Okay.
question last year.
Yeah, last year the same thing happened, yeah.
And we've got your application materials in here. I have to get to it electronically. Do any members of the board have any questions?
I assume the building department has vetted the request, and there'll be somebody there with primary responsibility to make sure that no one is overserved.
Yeah, that's us, that's us.
Thank you.
All right, any questions from members of the board? Seeing and hearing none, do I have, that's a good sign. Seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion?
I move to approve and sign a special one-day liquor license for the Nashoba Regional High School After Prom Committee fundraising event at the Stow Town Hall on Wednesday, March 6, 2019, between 6:30 and 9 p.m. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve a special one-day liquor license for the After Prom fundraiser on March 6, 2019, between 6:30 and 9 p.m. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that is unanimous.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Hope you
much.
raise a lot of
Thank
money.
you, and everyone's invited.
Thank you.
Pick that up tomorrow when I just pick it up.
Similar request from the Stow Cultural Council. Is there anybody here who wants to speak on that? That's all right. We have application materials. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I move to approve and sign a special one-day liquor license for the Stow Cultural Council's grant award ceremony and annual Stow art exhibition at the Pompano Community Center on Friday, March 15, 2019, between 6 and 10 p.m. Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve special liquor license for the Stow Cultural Council's grant award ceremony on March 15th, 2019, between 6 and 10 p.m. further discussion, I have one thing I wanna note. You've all received, the Stowe Cultural Council is a town department. You've all received town council's memo on that. We're gonna be discussing that memo at the March 12th meeting. Maureen, right, we're putting that on the agenda for March 12th?
When did that memo come in?
About a month ago, it got sent out to everyone. I just haven't had a chance to get it on the agenda.
Could you send me a special copy?
Of course.
I mean, I was talking about,
Oh. He needs a copy of the memo from John.
Okay, sure.
I don't remember receiving it, might have gone to my,
Okay. I wanna talk about that, but since we haven't discussed it and haven't made any changes in policy, it would be very unfair to apply any new rules, if there are to be any new rules, retroactively. So, that's all I wanted to say. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that's approved unanimously. All right, now, the pièce de résistance, he waits all year for this, the town administrator's annual
we wait all year.
financial summary. We have members of the Finance Committee, Capital Planning here, Minuteman representative, hi. And Bill, I think I will just turn it over to you. I'll just say this, for anybody watching at home, and even for the people here, I've come to view this as kind of the beginning of the budget season. You're not gonna get a lot of answers here, but you're gonna hopefully get an idea of what to look for in this coming season as things unfold and at town meeting. Hopefully, you'll come away with a better idea of what the big issues are facing us financially. Bill, want to take it away?
As a segue into my opening comments, this is a requirement of mine by our governance agreement, charter, that I have this annual joint board's state of the town's finances, is essentially the way. The expressed intent is to allow each of the departments that are here, including both regional school districts, except Nashoba is unable to bring a representative tonight, so I've got them coming at our next meeting. The other two towns have them tied up tonight. So we have the assessors, we have our capital planning committee, we have our finance committee, together with Minuteman's representative. We've been through this routine before, so essentially, and I'll leave the capital planning committee for last because there is an overhead based on the working group that we began. So why don't we start with the assessors? And essentially, it's to give a high level, 30,000 foot. It's not here to explain the budget and the details of it. It's to give you a quick summary of the cogent and significant or substantive issues that are faced by each department, where we are. And assessors can begin with my important figure, which is new growth.
Yep, so new growth for FY '20, we are in great shape for new growth. Last year's new growth was $571,000, and FY '20's new growth estimate is $684,000. This year, we have $34 million in new growth valuation, largely, again, due to Regency, the new condominium development. I wanna point out of the $34 million growth figure this year, $26 million of that is the Regency development. So without that, you know, you're looking at a difference of $8 million between the two figures. So, we're probably gonna get maybe one more year of growth out of this project. Fiscal '21 will probably be our last growth year, reaping the benefits of that. The project's about 80% complete right now, so after that, with the lack of any other new subdivisions or major construction projects, our growth is gonna go back down to where we usually are, which is $200,000 or $300,000 a year, basically. So,
You never know.
yeah, you never know.
Projects pop up all the time.
Exactly, so, and other than like the market's doing great. I mean, I have yet to see any drops in valuations or sale prices yet in Stow, and it has yet to even plateau, so we're still on the up and up,
Really? Okay.
basically, so.
Bill, how do you wanna do this? Should members of the board ask?
Feel free to ask.
Any questions for Kristen? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finance committee.
We don't want to steal any of your thunder, Bill.
Oh,
so,
please. Feel free.
I don't really have any planned remarks other than just say that we were happy with the way things ended up last last year, and we look forward to seeing how things turn out this year.
The Finance Committee, under the charter, is assigned responsibilities very similar to mine in a parallel track, which is they go through and interrogate or interview, I forgot. No. All the departments individually, similar to what the Capital Planning Committee does with regard to capital projects. So the departments end up, when the year is ended, with at least 3 separate interviews with town boards with regard to their budget. Mine is probably more frequent. Some of the departments I meet weekly once we get started. So the Finance Committee, because I get to go first in this process, is lagging, but I'll be issuing to them after tonight and the discussion I have with this interim budget, giving it to the Finance Committee, so they'll have a sense of where I am. And I've sent some emails to the chair of the Finance Committee to let them know, because I've made some tentative decisions and I wanted them to know early, because they had significant impact on the budget. So the due diligence process, I think, is more than adequate and it's thorough, and I think to date it's proved its value. So I think Minuteman would be next. And we have Alice DeLuca,
You do, here I am.
who's Stow's representative to the school committee. And I think she's typically the one that lodges the news. I won't say good or bad.
So, the good news is the overall number. So if you look at our total budget, it's up 3.38%. The individual components of that budget are, however, up different amounts. So, there is in that embedded some good news as well. The building project debt for FY '20 is just shy of $160,000. The new building will open in the fall of 2019, which is a year ahead. We are on budget and on time. So, that is phenomenal. And the price is good, $160,000 for the town for next year. The total assessment, if you include everything except for the middle school, is $805,715. That's including the building project debt. So, and that is what it is. I have, very complicated information about how that all gets calculated from the state and so forth, but it's $805,715, including the project debt, and the total assessment is $881,594, including the middle school assessment, since Minuteman provides the engineering program at the middle school at Hale.
Thank you, Alice. Questions for Alice?
Is the assessment to Stow going up because of enrollment or because of the increased costs? Or why don't you just give us a delta on the enrollment?
The enrollment is expected to be 19. If the school were completely filled, we would expect about 6% of the 8th graders from any given town to go to Minuteman. Stow is a very solid partner in the school and provides between 5 and 6% of the 8th grade. They go to Minuteman. There are member towns where that's not true. Some of the larger member towns.
I understand. Is our enrollment going up, pegged to be going up, or stay the same?
It's going up, we're expecting it to be going up 3 students, from 16 to 19, but we don't know yet because it's the spring.
I'm sorry?
We won't know the actual number until October.
No, I understand, but usually you have some projections and...
Yeah, we're projecting that we'll have 19 students instead of 16 students.
Okay, well, good luck to you.
I thought I remembered a few years ago it was over 20. Did I make that up?
No, that's
No?
true.
Oh,
These numbers go up and down, which is why we have, for the capital project, we have a rounding formula, which.
Right, smoothing.
Smoothing formula.
Don't we also have that for the for the operating budget too?
No,
No, it's just year to year?
yeah.
And, yeah, this isn't the place or time, but maybe we could have a report on the Minuteman School District's efforts to increase membership.
can have that report. I
Let's-
got myself assigned to the enrollment subcommittee, so.
I think that's a good idea. Let's have an update from Minuteman sometime in March or April.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I think, that puts the CPC up next.
We have this thing,
Yes.
we got a presentation ready to go.
Steve Jelinek, Chair of the Capital Planning Committee, best
First two
run
were
committee
your
in town.
tax slides, do you wanna go over those first?
Whatever you'd like, this is your moment.
My moment. So you go.
Capital Planning Committee, it's your,
Such a moment, he's taking the clock away.
There he is.
That way you can have
Never
all
said
the time in the world.
Miss America.
Never say I never did anything for you, Steve.
I would never say that.
Alex.
Could somebody turn off some of the lights, not all of them though?
License. Yes, so you don't have to hang
Alice.
Oh!
I'll sneak out under cover of darkness.
on. Okay.
Turn
It's gonna show
back
up well
Bill.
on TV.
Okay.
Does the other one stand?
I think I'd rather, if it's all or nothing, I'd rather have them all.
or keep going on and off, that will work.
This hand is on my
It
knee.
gets tiring.
All right, this is where we are.
Steve, why don't you go through your material?
I'd love to, except I
and
can't
then
see it.
I know, but you were asking me whether I wanted to go first, cause that
Alright.
will then
We'll take the
segue
slides
into
out of
my
the way.
Let's,
separate.
could we get those lights back on? Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Bill. That didn't work out.
Okay, so every year I come to this meeting and I say what a challenge it's gonna be. FY '20 is a particular challenge from the capital perspective. We are looking at something in the neighborhood of $2 million in capital requests so far this year. Go to the next slide. Oh, thank you.
Sure.
So this is, this is not unexpected. Last year I projected, based on the 5-year plans we received from folks, that we were gonna have a number of somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.8 million. I never believed that, but, we are looking at a number of just around $2 million in terms of capital requests for this coming year. This includes, $400,000 from the building department looking for construction funds to repair to replace the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system here in the town building. $625,000 from the fire department to replace engine 14. We're looking at $300,000 for Lower Village from the planning board, plus another $50,000 for the Complete Streets implementation program. And then the Nashoba Regional District has got a total of about $165,000 in requests. We have met with some of these folks, and as Bill said, we are busily interrogating them to find out how many of these items are must-haves and how many of these are things we can put off. But it promises to be an extremely challenging year from a capital perspective. Just as a little bit of a perspective, I typically present this slide at town meeting. This is a presentation of what we've spent for the past 5 years in blue, what we're looking at for this year in red, and what we're seeing for the next few years based on 5-year plans in green. So you can see how much more, how much higher the requests are this year compared to, on average. We're typically looking at something in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $600,000 in capital requests. So this $2 million really stands out. We don't buy fire trucks every year. We don't have major construction projects at Lower Village every year. But be that as it may, this is a pretty challenging year from a capital perspective. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Mr. Burke.
Chair Jelinek, what's the status on that Lower Village number? Is that up to date?
As far as I know, the estimate is, the current estimate is 300,000. I think that's subject to some change based on negotiation.
No, it's not.
It's a work in progress at this point.
I
I'm
understand.
expecting from Jesse soon to have an updated number, and that may not be the final one.
I would say that it's better than the first number you gave me.
Other questions from members of the board on capital? And then are you gonna do the flip side, the debt service?
Yes, but I would mention with respect to the fire truck request for purchase, it will be my recommendation, if it's supported on the merits, to debt fund that as a debt exclusion. And that would result in there being no impact on the 2020 budget. We pay nothing for a year from the time that we actually borrow. And given the amount and everything else that we've got on the board, my recommendation is that we debt finance instead of taxation. The other reason would be is that we have had a conference call this afternoon with our financial advisor on OPEB finally, for those of you, graciously provided us the money to go. And it's a new financial advising firm that we hired because Eastern Bank basically got out of the business. And this was the only one that had somebody who purports to have the credentials in OPEB. The others that we looked at didn't. And so, given that this is going to be a point of interest in the future for all communities, which is OPEB funding, changing Gatsby laws, which are constant now, and what we should be providing each year as what they required funding amount is a term that was used up until this year, and now you don't find it in some of the new language, but it means the same thing. What's the annual contribution that we should be making to OPEB? And it's a significant one. So the free cash that I typically put into capital projects, I'm almost certain, in other words, I plugged 200,000 in for 2020 for OPEB. I've had 100. I might be low on that estimate, but we'll know soon. But we've got that conference call today, Treasurer's Office, accounting, myself, and our financial advisor, because we've been getting our actuarial valuations done every 3 years by us Milligans, who basically provides a software program. And there's many others doing the same thing. Brian, part of this consulting contract was for Brian to go through that, and he's raised some questions about the approach, the methodology, because there are different methodologies that Milligan takes, and how we might be able to improve our position, i.e. lower, by changing some of the accounting and just acknowledging our practice, for example, that we pay in full up front every year from our budget what goes into the trust fund and fully fund our health care. That makes a difference when you're assessing what the outstanding liability is, something Milligan doesn't even account for, and most people don't. There's also the idea of how far out do you go, 20 years or 30 years? So we had that conversation today, and we're going back to Milligan through Julie and Brian to see if we can't get those modifications in place for that actuarial, which might improve. Once we've got that done, then we'll get the final report. But just want to let you know that we're getting close to that. Now, the alternative to financing $650,000 is we either raise taxes or take it from stored assets. And my feeling is with the unusually large request amount, and obviously the capital planning committee in the end has to make a decision, but when I'm looking at where the money's going and for what purposes, just how effective can you be in bringing it down significantly from where it is. So if the truck is something that on its merits is supported, then I'm going to say let's debt finance for that reason. So I just wanted to add that.
So I think Bill's gonna cover debt service next, but questions from the FinCom on the capital aspect of this? Anything? Nothing? Okay. Bill, you wanna, Steve, thank you. I really appreciate it.
And it should also be known that the chair of the Finance Committee, Capital Planning Committee, myself, and chair of the Selectmen have been meeting in a working group that was formed this year for the purposes of allowing all of those who participate in this process under the governance agreement to at least know what each is thinking at the time and share things, and in some cases even have input collectively, for example, on how much do you want to spend each year on stored assets. We have a policy, it's got a benchmark in there. I've agreed that input from others is fine with me on as to how much. We've got percentage benchmarks, and I've tentatively used the figure that I want to, but before it's done, we'll be meeting and then going back to your respective groups and see what other opinions are. Because it's either taxation or stored assets, or debt financing, putting it out. So that's pretty much the three sources, but reasonable people can disagree. I'm inclined to try to support the taxpayer. I started it with this current year, and I'd like to continue. I've got this budget and one more. I'd like to be able to do what I can when I've left here, or we can, to have us in as preferred a position with regard to ability to tax and burden to tax. So I'm kind of the low end with the stored asset in our policy instead of the higher end, because I'd like to give it, to buy down the impacts of the budget like we did this year. Okay, so on to debt. I was asked to have this included. No surprise to anyone is that the trend line is up. Each year we've done a number of large building projects for a number of years now, and we're not done yet. And so, and it's broken out interest, principal, short-term, long-term. But in the end, you can color it one line for me, it's going up. This is town debt, not net, because we do have offsets, and the next one will show that going forward, because we do retire the Hale School in 2020. We had a small retirement, well, not a small retirement, about 190,000 retired this year, but it was overcome by, so this is historical, 2010 to the present year, trend line is consistently up. And the projects, I think all of us here know what those projects are. The debt finance we're doing for Hale School is still on there. Center School's been added. We've now also added the Pompo Fire Station Community Center. And that's a perspective on where our money's been going for debt financing. Are there any? Yes.
Minuteman, is any of that in there?
Yep. But it's not a large figure yet.
Right.
And it won't become as large as some of the others because we're only 1/9 of it. But I'm carrying the overlapping debt that is allowed because we debt serviced it, not all communities did. So I've got what they're estimating to be in our assessment, what amount of money is attributable just to the capital debt, and that's plugged in, and I've got Nashoba's as well, because they have two sources on that.
Peter, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, that's actually the annual debt service, right? It's not the town debt.
Yes, the debt service.
Yeah, I don't break out just town debt. I mean, it is true that 70% of our town debt is school-related projects.
That's not the total debt, that's just we pay on it.
I understand. We might wanna change the title then, so it doesn't say town debt. Anyway, I'd be happy if it was the town.
No, that's that
There's a
annual debt
ringer in
payment.
every crowd.
That's, I know.
Debt service.
That schedule you could put out.
So, as you have for fiscal year 19, or for us to get into fiscal year 20, for the existing project, is this the peak of that debt services that we're gonna have on a yearly basis?
Actually, this coming year, 2020, is gonna be the highest.
Is the peak?
Yeah, and I'll give you that, so on the next slide. So, 2020. And almost all of that increase is attributable to the fact that the Fire Station Community Center is being fully loaded. And the difference, if you backed out just the amount of increase, because we have been paying some debt on the short-term debt on the Fire Station Community Center. Now we're loading up full-time debt. The amount of increase in the Fire Station Community Center, just that is 270,000 difference. And if you back that out, we'd actually see a decrease in 2020 with everything else that's on there, but instead we see an increase. Now, what this estimated net debt payments are, so that's why the numbers here don't correspond with the numbers there in some instances, because we've got $542,000 in the MSBA buy down for the Hale School. Now that disappears by 21. 20 is the last year. So that's why some of these, if you look at the amounts, they are higher on the first one than the second one, because this is net debt backing out what we get for from the MSBA. So when that will disappear. But what you don't have here is this is our debt schedule as it is with nothing else loaded up. So we know that the Nashoba Regional School District's looking for a new project, whatever that's defined as, okay? We have our own library folks who are in the process now of looking at it. Won't be affected. Town Hall's looking for something, but primarily community preservation monies is where they're looking. But those two big projects I just mentioned to you, especially Nashoba, because there's only 3 of us paying the total freight. Unless, and this is just a hypothetical, if it were to be a new school instead of an ad rental, okay, you can put a plug number in, I'm sure some folks have what that might cost. It'll be significant, and it'll be divided by 3 instead of, say, 9. So you can imagine what happens here in that case. The library, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 million total, but that project will be voted on, whether it passes or not, and Nashoba does, that will be determined by the people, but we've done no what-ifs here so far. We will begin to do that a little further along to see where those projects, I don't like to speculate on too broad a number. I'd like to have as a plug number, something that is rationally based. For example, when Nashoba decides what they want to build, then new school as opposed to ad rental or whatever, and does it include on that site, which would include demolition of the existing, I'd wait for those because they're significant figures. You can just assume it's going to be a noticeable number for now, and then you get to it.
Ollie?
Just a follow-up clarity, since you said that your plan, if we were to move forward with the fire truck, would be
The debt funding.
to that funding.
Yeah.
Would we notice that on these graphs?
Very little. Because you can, depending on how far we debt it out, we'll base that more on what our debt schedule looks like. We can do some refinancing, we do that all the time. But that's $650,000 you can debt out for the expected life of the vehicle or the structure. So that would be, if we wanted it to, if we're worried about the monthly payments as you do with other things, as opposed to the total amount paid back, you want to lower the payments, then we'll stretch it out. And again, we have that flexibility at various times to refinance, but it won't be a driver here.
Mr. Burke?
Thank you. And following up on Atlee's point, and maybe the town administrator covered it, but what's the total debt just this coming fiscal year, just as an idea?
I mean, what's our outstanding debt if we were to cut a check for everything we owe?
Well, yeah, what debt are we carrying right now, just round numbers?
I don't remember what it is. I can get that for you.
All right, that's not that important.
It's not one that's a working number, we don't.
No, well, it would help.
It's a large number, it's going up, okay?
The reason, all right, then maybe I should have just asked.
I'll get you the number though.
Okay.
I don't know what it is right now.
It's the reason I asked it, maybe I should ask this straight out. Let's say, I mean, you're right, we can't figure out, or we can't anticipate what the school is going to do in terms of capital construction. But we have on the backfire the library restoration project, and you were just throwing numbers out like $4 or $5 million. How much would that affect the trend lines here that we're seeing?
I hate to speculate on that.
But if it was a $4 million, how would it affect our debt payments?
It'd go up.
By how much?
I'll go do the calculation and give it to you. I don't know.
That depends on the term, the rate. It depends on how long he does short term. What you can say, obviously, more than the fire truck, it would be noticeable, less than Pompo, and far less than center school, if it were that amount.
It's just that if we're,
And assuming 20 years, at least 20 years.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Well,
Chair.
what we do each time is once we've got a real number, we go through that what if, we let people know what the impact will be.
Yeah.
You know, I hate just throwing out, you know.
I was just trying to get a rough feel on how, it would be nice to see the debt service
So
lines
we'll
trend
begin
down.
to do the what ifs when we get closer, but they haven't submitted anything, I don't have any numbers from it.
Yeah.
This is old numbers from 2012 on that, about 4 million. So I was just using that as a plug number to give you a benchmark, but I hate doing the what ifs financially until we get a little closer, we know what they are. And then I'll have a year to plug it in, because that makes a difference. I mean, what year am I gonna plug it in? I don't even know yet.
But to sort of pick up on what you're saying in response to Brian, I remember when we did the Pompo project, after we did design and as we were going to town meeting for construction, we did run the numbers with certain assumptions about interest rates and terms.
Yeah, that's what I just said, as you get
Right.
closer to it, and you've got real
That's-
numbers. We had a
that's the
construction
time.
cost from a bid,
Right.
and we had a timing. Right now, I don't even know when that they will put it forward. It's probably several years off, and that would make a difference.
Well, that's why I wanted to have a number for total debt, so I could maybe just put a ratio in my mind. It wouldn't be exact, but it would have just given me a sense. So
Rich?
you basically, it would be, if it's a $4 million project, is roughly 3.5 times the fire truck. The other question I have is it possible to bond the Lower Village construction project? And if so, is it worthwhile?
We can, and I don't think the figure at this point at 300, which may or may not come down, I'm not worried that it's gonna necessarily go up on it. And my recommendation at town meeting is to probably use some free cash, because the money for, whatever the amount of money is that we go to town meeting with and the planning board puts forward with their new engineer and they've got a cost estimate that will represent, we've gotta start to work. So I can't use taxation and I can't use borrowing, so it's gonna have to be free cash, because you're gonna need the money if you want the job done this spring. You don't wanna wait till summer, because if it's taxation, it's after July 1st, and that will be when we borrow it as well to kick it a year in advance. So the smart play is to use stored assets so that we can get the job done and get started. So it will be even less than what I'm showing now, which is on the budget sheet is $300,000, only because my position might not be the one that the consensus wants on to use Chapter 90 or not, and whether to go and try to get Chapter 90 back by going to the taxpayer, which isn't the argument I'm making, but there are some that want that. Okay, if you want to make them whole again, so there's not a possibility that I would be recommending that for a debt
So it is not,
finance.
yes, so the answer to my question is it's not feasible to do that.
It is feasible, I'm just saying I won't be recommending for the reasons I just
Yeah,
gave.
okay,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't be practical, let's put it that way, because you need the money right now. And the
Can I
only,
let somebody else ask a question?
I just wanted to make one more comment, Mr. Chair, with your kind patience, which is I do think we have to have a public discussion about about replenishing Chapter 90 funds. I'm not saying where I come down on it, I just think that has to be had. Thank you very much for your indulgence, Mr. Chair and Mr. Town Administrator.
I think that can come up in the context of all the budget discussions we'll have. I think you're right. There has to be a discussion of that. Rich?
I just wanted to just point out one thing. The total amount of debt that we have, that we don't report on it as far as I know right now, because it changes with payments. But I'd be interested to see that number too. But that number, in a vacuum, doesn't really mean that much. I think what's more important is what it is a percentage of, say, the budget, right? So if, as a percent of budget, I think I'd be interested to see what that is. I'm gonna be calculating these numbers as a percent of budget, and I think it'll tell actually a better story about our actual debt payments. I think it's probably not been going up. It's probably
Part of what S&P requires for AAA is not the total amount of debt you're carrying, it's what your annual debt payment is as a percentage of your expenditures,
Right.
and your capacity and ability to pay over time, looking further out. I never use total debt for anything, so I don't, we can calculate it, but it's not a meaningful, as a practical matter, I've never had it come into play, and it's never for, say, bond purposes or anything, ever been raised with us. I'm not saying it has no meaning, but for me, as a practical matter, it doesn't come into play.
All right, it was a dumb question, I withdraw it.
It's not a dumb question.
It's not a dumb question, I'd be interested to know too, I just think it adds more meaning comparative to something either.
I'll have that number and I'll provide it to all of you, so for those that are concerned
One
about
thing,
it,
one thing that's come up in our strategic planning discussions that I thought you were going there, was that we do have a policy on debt, and it basically says that we should not carry so much debt that we jeopardize our favorable bond rating, and we're nowhere near that.
We've been in a very comfortable position
Right.
for some number of years, if that's any help to you.
The question, you know, and it's not for tonight, but we've discussed it briefly privately, is, you know, well, should you have an artificial limit? Should you have either a number limit or a percentage limit? Pros and cons, I guess, about that, but, you know, right now, we do have a policy and we're well within it. So, could I just, I wanted to just say thank you to Steve and Bill. In our discussions, we had talked about trying to give everyone tonight a broader perspective on debt and capital and doing it visually so that everyone was on the same page. And I think that worked out very, very well. I also just want to comment on one thing. Let's not talk about the library project or any other project as though it's a foregone conclusion. You know, I don't mean to be positive or negative about that, but that has to go through the vetting and interrogation that capital planning does. There's always a possibility that even if it does go forward, that there is some fundraising component, or that there should be some fundraising component. So let's not just make assumptions that it goes forward, or that it goes forward at the $4 or $5 million level.
At the same time, you wanna be cognizant as you're doing the what-ifs, that,
Right. That's
you know,
your
I mean, I
upside.
don't think we wanna ignore it until all of a sudden the vote comes up.
Right.
You know, but we've got time, I think, on both of those. And
Okay.
I wouldn't wanna put a figure in my debt schedule now on a what-if.
Did you have any more slides? You're very good at this PowerPoint thing, you know.
Yeah. I was better than I thought.
Yeah, it's
I was
great.
better than I thought I was. Anyway, thank you. That concludes tonight's presentation,
Any final questions?
at least on the joint boards.
Any final questions from anybody in the audience? From the board?
I had one
Rich,
comment
one,
that
yes.
I had to leave briefly. Was it mentioned what the tax rate went to and? That it
What,
went-
for this
No.
year?
Yeah, that it went down. Did you mention that?
No, I wasn't, we're going forward now. But it went down significantly, and that was the intent we
Now
had.
it's all about
Everybody
what do you
should
know for
recognize
statement?
that the tax rate went down
Yeah,
pretty significantly.
That is significant.
yeah, but we still paid more. Don't
You can't
don't
have
be
it all,
fooled by
as I
that.
say.
How do I with statistics?
I think more importantly to me is that net, the municipal, non-school, non-debt, the departmental budgets this year, net was a decrease,
That's,
not an increase. And that's significant, I think.
it is.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Steve. Excellent.
you.
Do you want to segue into? Do you want to segue into your 2020 budget?
Brian, am I next? Is that fault anytime in the next 2 years? It's gonna be your fault.
It would be my fault anyway.
Yeah. You've got time to run out and get a
Yeah,
drink.
we'll go downstairs.
Thank you, Ellen.
Stop me before I spill again.
All right, next on the agenda, the town administrator's preview, I guess, of the 2020 budget.
So this year's been a little different than, I don't know, in memory of the past number of years, which is, generally I start off the first meeting in February with a preliminary budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which essentially includes all those requests as submitted by the departments, my early estimates on revenues, and some other things. But because of some crowded agendas and other things, I agreed to put it off a few weeks. But that's resulted in is that essentially what you've got that I gave you both in a narrative and a spreadsheet is I've begun development of my budget, and so in my column, and I'm giving it for the moment only to you folks because I've not made final decisions, and I haven't talked to some of the departments where I've made some tentative number adjustments, but I can give you the overall and let you know that that's continuing to take place, but in fairness to the departments which we haven't reached. I mean, I could have hidden the whole thing, but then I was thinking, because it would give you some sense that some adjustments are being made in the right direction on the budget, because we had not only the capital project request, but our annual debt payment. We've got some significant increases here, so I wanted to give you a broader picture of, because we've got some pretty exciting possibilities going on too. In any event, so this is yours only for the moment, and then as I complete the process of evaluating and assessing and sharing with the departments and finalizing, then this will be finalized, but it isn't. So I just wanted to let you know that numbers embedded in the department budgets particularly are still fluid. Okay, but I have made some tentative, because if I don't plug them in, I've got no sense how the budget's doing and the rest of it. So as a working document, it's important for me to put those numbers in, but it's also important to note that they're not final, and therefore I didn't want to be publicizing the fact that these numbers, if someone looked at it and took it out of context, might think this is final, because it's not. So the big picture's the same though. So just to start on the first page, which, because the document works from back to front, the summary page is the first page, and we start up above with revenues. And just to give you, drop to the total income line, and it shows 34,132,035, which is about a 12% increase over the current year. And then I'll go through the details as to how do we get that. The first is the tax levy limit, and in there is the Prop 2.5 and our new growth. So if you look to the second page, you'll get some detail on how we get to that number. So we have this year's levy, Prop 2.5 added, which is 660,782. And you'll see where I'm carrying only 600,000 for new growth, because until I was gingerly surprised and pleased today to hear from the assessors that it was going up, and I didn't have a chance to plug it in, but even if I did, it wouldn't have changed because I'd already given you the budget. So that number's now gone up from 600 to 681. I've already plugged it in. It makes a difference. Then we have our debt exclusions. So under that, we have our own debt exclusions, and we have Nashoba Regional School District and Minuteman. I've combined them, but I've gotten the overlaying debt numbers from both schools, what they think they'll be paying, and because we debt exclude those projects, that gets brought into it. That's added to the Prop 2.5 levy limit number, and now you drop down and you've got 30,093,100. So back to the first page, that's the number that shows up at the top under property tax. Okay, so essentially what it is that a large portion of that on the second page is a potential revenue, because it's the unused levy capacity that we have that we're not using. So and so the purpose of this document is to give you a sense of what our total revenues could be this year if we needed them. Okay, but the unused levy capacity is just that. And if you want to know what that unused levy capacity is going to be, if you drop to the bottom of the first page, bottom line, budget surplus deficit, because that's how I show it until we're done, and then it goes over to unused levy. So in my column right now, we would have 1,816,913 of unused levy capacity. So that, with that amount under Prop 2.5 levy limit. Okay? So now back to the top. 30,093,1 for property tax. State aid, I'm level funding because I'm using the governor's budget one, and he level funded on us. Now that, you know how that process works until the state, Senate, and House weigh in, and then the conference committees and all the rest, but that's the plug number I'm using. The state aid school building assistance, which is for the Hale School, that number has been fixed. Next year is the last year at 542,576. And so just to give you a sense of what the net will be on our annual debt payment for that, when that is unloaded, our total payment right now, and you'll see on the debt schedule for the Hale School, is $744,494. You back out the 542, there's a difference there of about 201,000, which, so our unused levy capacity in the form of excluded debt is going to disappear by the amount that 744, 494, okay, which is our annual debt payment, is going to be reduced, okay, when it's unloaded, but also we're going to lose $503,000 of excluded debt, which affects our potential revenue. So the net's 201,000 to the plus, but as I said before, the annual Minuteman, that portion of our assessment from Minuteman attributable to the school project is going to meet or exceed that 201. But it's nice to have had it so we could do it without adversely affecting, to a larger degree, the debt schedule. Below that is local receipts, revenue. I'm estimating 2,132,000. And what I tie that to, generally speaking, unless there's something else to be factored in, is I take the last fiscal year's actual receipts. I asked myself whether there's anything substantive that would change one way or the other on it. And I looked at the trends, and if there isn't, then I say, okay, I want to get close to that actual in 18. The actual in 18 was 2,215,500. I'm plugging in 2,132,000. So I'm leaving some buffer there. I've got no reason to believe that what's happening recently is going to not continue. But still, I leave some there because I want to be a little conservative, but I'm trying to get closer to actuals, budget to actuals. So that's why I use that number. Transfer from other funds is not budget relevant, but it's 211. Those are plug numbers that come in from when we transfer from one account to another, and the rest of it, but it's not a significant budget figure because it's budget neutral. So then you drop down to income used for capital outlays. You'll see where I'm applying 200,000 in free cash for OPEB. I did up it for this fiscal year to 100 from 50, and then I was looking at our last valuations and what the Milligan reports were telling us our required annual contribution should be. And so I said, I'm going to put 200 in there, which is a little lower than what they were projecting we should be paying. But now in talking with Brian Whitworth and we're working with Milligan, he didn't think this could be closer, on the low side, but closer than otherwise. But I'll wait until he gets it, and I'm asking him for a recommendation. And when we get the report, I'll show everybody what we've got in it. But I'm carrying 200 for now. Then 450 of free cash for non-debted capital articles for a total of 650. Now 650 represents just under 10% of our stored assets. As you know, our policy says no lower than 5%, 10 to 15 on the high side. And I think, as I've said before, I've been trying to stay at or a little below 10 instead of going up because I'd like to give the taxpayers relief. I think it's sufficient enough as it is, but that's my recommendation. But we'll talk about that as our working group speaks, and I'm happy to put whatever total amount folks would like. But that benchmark is just under, it's 9.83%, I think it's just under 10. Under 10% of this year's budget, current year's budget, and the current year's certified free cash and stabilization, as close to the date as you can get it. Interest is accrued, but it's a benchmark. So then you've got a total potential revenue of $34,132,035, which is 12% above the current year. Any questions on that?
No, overall, it is a pretty good picture. Questions from the board? Okay.
Overlay surplus, we're gonna know that before the.
I know that I have
budget's
none
voted
right
in.
now.
I'm
That's why
sorry?
you- I have none right now, that's why you don't have it.
No, I understand, but are we gonna have it before?
No, we don't have any,
Oh, I see, thank you.
okay?
I thought we
Now,
did.
it might change, but there's some pending cases in the assessors that
Okay.
are significant, and so I'm holding off for now. I hope there's a deal struck in one case soon, and then I'll have some.
So have they been granting a lot of abatements?
Well, no, they're reserving a fair sum.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't wanna get into, but I
Right.
think you can probably speculate
Right.
where we are on that. So I respect the assessor saying that, and I can't get it until they release it with the approval of the accountant. So right now I'm not planning on any overlay surplus. But if we get it, and that's why I don't usually use it as a stored asset, because it's not, from
Oh,
year to
yeah.
year, you don't know if you got it,
No, I understand.
you know? But I use it when I can get it, obviously, and if it comes to me before this budget goes to print, then that's what I'll use. So, now we start with the expenditures. So, using my column again, the general municipal budget, which are the departmental budgets, their wages and expenses. It's not the capital, it's not special articles, it's the departmental's operating budgets, which are contained in detail in this report. And basically, it's wages and expenses. I'm at the point right now with some tentative decisions at $7,050,129, which represents only a 2.44% increase over this year, which is pretty good given that this year was a net decrease, and I had some costs in here, structural costs such as insurance and county retirement, that were both, not double, they're significant increases that I don't control, but technically they're in the municipal budget.
Right.
If those had been less, then this would be less, but at 2.44, I'm comfortable, at least at this point, that's a pretty tight budget.
The next line is something you don't see every day.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in my career here, let me tell you that. So, let's go to that one. Do you have a question, Brian?
Yeah, real quick question. Selectmen wages. I don't know about you guys, so I'm not getting any money. Can we retitle that as the Selectmen's Administrative Assistant wages? Because I assume that's what that is.
Where are you? On the detail line item?
Yeah. Oh, you're way down.
Yeah. Matter of fact, this year I might break out, as I do in many departments, the department head, or the administrative assistant in this case, line item, like I do other departments that have a single line item. But yes, it can be broken out.
I just want to see how much Tom Ryan is making more than I am.
I was gonna say, you're not getting paid?
Well, I can show you that without breaking it out, all right? That's,
Tom, we voted
this is off
to
the
cut his
books.
salary at one of those meetings he missed.
Yeah. December 25th meeting.
That's right.
Which I wasn't there, I found out. I checked.
Yeah, that can be done if you'd like, and just, we'll figure out what you want to do with it.
Sorry about that. Okay,
Let's
let's continue.
Yeah. The Nashoba Regional School District, that's not a misprint. That is right now where the school committee discussions are, given their total budget increase, which is a little above 3%. We've benefited primarily because the way they calculate assessments is by rolling student population. And compared to Bolton and Lancaster, we're lowest. And noticeably enough that at this point, I'm carrying a 1% increase in the assessment.
So
And this is the single largest line item in our budget,
Yeah.
by far.
No,
And my understanding is they're gonna make there's a possibility one more adjustment comes, i.e.
Down.
So what is their,
I'm not at liberty to get into, because they haven't voted anything yet.
okay, all right.
So all I will tell you, and this has been reported, I think, in the newspapers about where they are totally, but they haven't got into and they can, when they come in a couple of weeks, they'll be able to, the number will be known, and they can explain the details about it.
Yeah, but it's based on 5-year rolling assessments, and we're just.
And where their budget, but more importantly, it's their budget,
Mhm.
and where they're coming in, and what, for me, because that's what drives all of this. We got lucky because by comparison,
Right.
our enrollment increases by that formula were less, but if their budget was 5 or 6%,
It wouldn't matter.
well, we'd still be less than the other two, but it wouldn't be,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be where we are.
And that's great. And let's keep in mind, we had some years there where.
We were the big dog at one time.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's Lancaster's turn in the box.
Yeah, but they can't
Bolton and
afford it.
Lancaster both, actually, I believe Bolton's enrollments, I think they're the biggest increase by percentage.
Oh, are they? Bolton?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Okay.
So,
They have some new housing over there. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, that has no impact on their school assessment, but in any event, I believe they're facing the largest percent increase, and it's noticeable compared to ours.
They got more kids now.
Yeah, that's what I said, they got the large.
Well, I'm saying the housing is.
I don't know what the hell housing, anyway, so, right now, I'm carrying that, and that's a safe number, I think, and I say God bless them. Now, Minuteman Voc Tech, that's 21% increase, okay? We're fortunate in that the number, if it was a much larger number at that increase, my concern over time is when the assessment gets larger, student enrollments get to a more significant figure. It's happening in Lancaster now. That's gonna be the one you need to keep an eye on.
So when Alice, I'm sorry, I have a question.
Please.
When Alice was talking earlier, she didn't, her presentation didn't match this at all. It was.
Well, the total assessment, when she
She said
finally
the
added in
808,
the middle
right.
school, was 881. That was
Right.
about, so the figure she gave was accurate.
Yeah, but her percentages were, she said like,
Well, she was saying the school budget, and I don't know because I haven't looked at that, but she was referring to school budget when she gave the lower number. She wasn't talking to our assessment.
oh, I see, okay. Yeah, so if this assessment is for 16 to 19 kids,
And if she was talking about the operating budget,
that's different.
she's not
right.
taking into account, because
That-
this assessment is operating and capital.
Right, yeah, this is very expensive per
Yeah.
It's
student.
over 40,000.
I just did the math, it's like 41.9 or something.
Yes, and that's
For
why
high
Bill's
school.
mentioning it, and
Right, and we talked about that at town meeting when we voted to stay in the district, I remember that. So-
Technically, we didn't vote to stay in the district, we voted for the building, but the debate was essentially about staying in the district. Yeah.
So moving to the next figure, which is our debt payment estimated for next year, 26,27933, which is an 8.4% increase. And as I said, the single driver of that is that we're fully loading up Fire Station Community Center. And the increase in that number alone is 272,300. So if you back that out of the 26, we'd actually see a slight decrease, everything else being equal. But we can't omit it. But that is the driver. That's the reason for the increase. And that's nothing we can do about that at this moment. The raise and appropriate, which are the special articles, what you can do if you go to page 12, and I think in my narrative I hit some of the highlight numbers on that, and I'll do it here. First of all, I'm lowering the legal fund budget by 10. So that's a plus. And I think equally as important, the notorious educational incentive is going down 10.
Notorious.
Well, it's in some people's minds. I know I'm anxious.
I did.
Anyway, it's going down 10, so that's all I want to know about that. All right? Now, the increases, starting with the veterans' benefits, and again, that is unpredictable. We don't control it, and it's a state mandate. But whatever we spend, we get reimbursed 75%. But as I think I explained in the narrative, he had three new veterans get approved for living expenses. Had to just get a reserve fund transfer because of that, and those three that got loaded up this year, which weren't even known last year, are expected to stay. So those are numbers based on actual veterans who have qualified for living expense benefits. But that's a significant impact. The only way you could avoid that is if you wanted to begin anticipating and budgeting more than you know each year, probably even it out, but that means there are years there are years we don't have anybody coming on, and so you'd be taking money off the table, and so I think the way that we do approach it is the best way to do it, and I'll be providing some free cash, because he got loaded up this year and he's not gonna make the end of the year, so we got a reserve fund transfer.
Yep.
And I, up until the end of the town meeting, and I said, I'll plug in the balance between that and the end of the year from free cash, so we can get through, and then all of it gets loaded up for next year. So that went up. The road machinery expenses, which are, they can spend more than we ever give them, it's going up 12% from 53 to 59, but the property value valuations are going up
Valuation here,
for the
right?
consultants and softwares, and I will say this about many of our expenses, because now, with all the software programs that are out there, and everybody faces this in the private sector, public sector, it's not the purchase of the software, it's the annual maintenance of these things and the costs. And that's where most of our IT, in this case, in the assessors, all that specialized, and they're asking for, as a capital request, brand-new commercial software and some hardware to go with it, which is not here, but we're having to, for this year's valuation, we're needing to pay what we're doing now under the current software, which is inefficient. But I'll be truthful with you, you get your money back with accurate valuations, you know?
Kristen made a very effective case for capital planning. Number one, the existing.
By the way, she's damn good at what she does,
Yeah,
and she's
she
very
is.
articulate and persuasive.
The existing software dates from 1985, and it is at risk of becoming non-compatible with the existing hardware. Certainly, if we got new hardware, it isn't compatible. Next year's evaluation year, and the state evaluators have told us if we have any problems with our antiquated software, they're not helping us with it. And there is a very good chance it will value additions better. It will amortize them from the date that the additions go on the home. The current software can't handle additions as well, and it amortizes it back to the date that the building was originally built. And we wind up not, the valuation is reduced as a result of that, artificially reduced as a result of that. So she made a very good case.
We miss out on
Yeah.
some valuable assessment increases by the software we're using and the joke and poke that we do is, you know.
But it's also necessary to substantiate our assessments.
Well, we have measurements by state that we have to come in,
Yeah.
you know, and that's the other thing.
How do we, I don't wanna hold things up, but just an idle question, how do we do on abatement requests? We good at it?
I mean, what's our win-loss record?
Yeah, kinda.
I don't know, but we've done reasonably well. I can't give you a percentage, but we win our fair share. We don't go unless we think, and we've got, led by the chair of that, we have a very good professional. He does this
Yeah.
commercially, and we've had some great principal assessors, the current one and her predecessor, Dottie. And so we do well, to the degree that they talk with me, we talk about it, the rest of it.
That's reassuring, thank you.
The final figure I want to mention is that I've plugged in 15,000 for a townwide employee compensation, staffing, and position classification study. It's been a long time since we've had one. Basically, I've been doing it myself on an annual basis based on people making requests of me, and that's no way to run a business. I do my best at it. I'm not saying I don't do reasonably well, but I think for credibility purposes, rather than having one person doing it, having an outside disinterested firm who does this as a specialty. And I've contacted 3, and 2 of them, one is the MMA, which does a lot of what we do and understands. They have a consulting arm of it. And then the UMass Boston firm, I think it's Collins Institute, which does the same thing. And there's many people who've been this in their lifetime and go on to do those things. And they're well respected. And I'm waiting for some quotes back, so that 15's a plug number. I think it's reasonably close, but it might go one way or the other a few. But that's where I am right now. I'll have something before town meeting, so I'll have an actual number for it. And so that's why, one of the things I've been telling departments is that I don't intend to support any new hires until this is done. I think that's the fair thing to do, and I have a couple that want that. And so I've just respectfully asked folks to wait for new hires particularly. Because that's a go, no-go once you got them, you know, that's not something you can make adjustments for later. So we'll get somebody on board, we can have somebody have this complete in time for next year's budget season. So that's pretty much where I am on that. And those are the,
What's the 23,000 for Norfolk County Aggie?
that's our tuition cost, because we've got a student going to that school next
Okay.
year.
Is that, and that's new, right?
Yeah, we haven't had that. We've had Assabet in the last few
Assabet,
years, and then
right.
this year we had no one, so I said, wow, you know.
Right, okay.
Then I got the
Someone's
phone.
going to Norfolk?
Huh?
They're going to Norfolk?
Ag, yeah.
If they offer programs that they need.
They were bargaining.
But it's a higher tuition, and I use that term loosely, I don't think technically that could be. That's more than what we're paying at Assabet, but you gotta pay it.
It's less than Minuteman.
That's a bargain.
Everything is less than that.
All right, so, those are the raise and appropriate. There might be some minor adjustments in there, but this is getting reasonably close. So the big dog is the capital. And, you know, that, the decisions haven't been made by the capital planning committee, but with our little group working session, starting to talk about some things. You know, so I'm looking at, so if you pull, and I'm not carrying in my budget the ambulance, because if it goes forward, I'm not gonna recommend it I'm gonna recommend it as debt financing, so it's not gonna be in the budget.
Fire engine,
Fire truck.
That's what did I say?
ambulance. We already got 2 of those.
See, I should have said that's what I said before I even asked, because that would have covered me, but I didn't. That's how I'm slipping. I only got one good year left of me, I think. Well, maybe that, it's going fast. Yes, the fire truck. So that's not in my numbers. If you look back there, you'll see that it's not. Hopefully, the capital planning committee we might be able to make some other reductions. The other thing I would say is that I am carrying the 300,000 for the lower village on that. I would just say this, and it's fair to have that discussion about Chapter 90. If it's Chapter 90, again, that's gonna be budget neutral, okay? Because that's money that's appropriated to us, we have on hand. It would be appropriate it won't be appropriate transfer, which free cash is. It's, what I would do is I would put it, we have a standalone article for accepting annually the Chapter 90. And in that, I would probably add the amount, you know, to include for the purposes of, so that there would be that opportunity for discussion of the matter in an article. You know what I mean? Whatever that figure is. But it would obviously positively impact the budget if we took from Chapter 90 some or in part. But we'll have that discussion, and, you know, I've been talking with Michael, and I always have. I mean, Mike graciously agreed from the beginning. You know, it is a roadway project, it's a pretty important one, and he didn't have anything at the time. But if we're going to make him whole or some amount, then that's not in this budget. And so as soon as people, and we can have that discussion starting with ourselves and have the finance committee discuss it, and what if you want, then that's not in here, so that would necessarily increase where we are on that.
I think there's definitely gonna be, and Brian already hinted at this, there's gonna be some who want to see something for Chapter 90. I'm not saying if I think that's good or bad, I just think people are gonna wanna see
So
it.
I would just ask the advocates to begin to get some sense of how much. In other words,
Well,
talk, you know, and if it's somebody on the finance committee, then they can drive that or not. You know, because we need a number at some point, you know.
well, I think that's gonna, right, and I think that should come from Mike. What I was gonna say is, this should be part of that conversation you and I have had, which is what roads in town need to be worked on and why. And it has to be evidence-based. We've agreed that we were gonna let the Complete Streets Committee run with that. Not a lot has happened on that particular subject. I think we need to ask Complete Streets, Jesse, God knows they have a lot to do though, to try to help Mike figure out if he's gonna get X dollars in reimbursed Chapter 90 money next year, what does he intend to spend it on and why?
So I would respectfully request that that committee do this. Mike's
I-
on it, everybody else is on
I
it,
agree.
Complete Streets, and have that discussion with Mike, and then Mike can come forward either on a loan or as part of the group saying, we've agreed collectively that, you know, this amount of money for this purpose.
So I'll take the
Because at
task.
the time I talked to him, he didn't have a street
Right.
and a project in mind, because typically what you do is, he waits to bundle up several years in a row for a larger one, but it might be that if the Complete Streets group says, you know, maybe we could take smaller projects, or whatever rational basis, at least it's coming from a thought process
Exactly.
collectively, instead of me making the call, or even
And-
me and Mike making the call.
And public safety is on Complete Streets.
Right.
And so I will take the task of asking Mike, if everyone's okay, I'm asking Mike and Jesse, because I'm on that committee, to try to bring this to the forefront. I don't know how much success I'll have.
I was at Mike's presentation to the Finance Committee, Mr. Chair, sorry for interrupting, and he had some decided thoughts. I'm not saying, but things have changed since he last was interviewed / interrogated by Finance Committee, so I don't know.
Interrogate is such a harsh word, I don't know.
I don't know where we got it from.
Oh, it's what I used to do when I was on the Django. I'm sorry. They don't even use that term anymore, they can't.
But I'm just saying that I think that's the way to go. It's got to start with Mike. My only question is, and I'm sorry for my loss of memory, on Complete Streets, do they have a Finance Committee representative?
No.
I don't know if it's possible to involve, well,
Not at this point.
I would do this, you've got a short period of time.
fine.
I think Complete Streets has enough people there, including the primary benefactor, which is Mike. It's his Chapter 90. He typically makes the decision on these matters. Have him, because he's on this group with the others that are dealing with traffic and streets and street conditions. They've got data, they've got all the rest of it. All they gotta do is do it, and I would say, I'm happy to send an email to the chair of that committee and say,
I think you should do that.
okay.
And
I'll
that
talk
chair
with
is-
Mike and see where he is. I
Yeah.
told him we would chat again.
That's Karen.
Huh?
That's Karen.
Who's,
Karen Kelleher is chair of Complete Streets.
of Complete Streets.
Um,
Well, I think,
And I will send an
I'll send
email
it
as
to a
well.
couple then,
Yeah.
because Jesse is the planner, is gonna do all the work
Yeah.
along with Michael, so.
No, I think Complete Streets is constituted the way it should be. They don't make money decisions. They make road priority decisions.
Okay.
Mr. Burke.
Mr. Chair, if that's a process we have in place, I have no problems with it. I just would respectfully suggest that Finance Committee be kept in the loop on that, because they did express an interest in it.
Well, okay.
I'm not saying that they become part of the decision.
We could keep them in the loop by
Did the
when we
institution-
meet and the chair is there, we'll talk about it with capital
Yeah.
planning and the four of
And
us,
there's a
yes.
difference between the institution of the Finance Committee being interested and individual members being interested in their roads being fixed.
I don't think there was ever.
I think we've got a means by which we can.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
but I
we
don't
already
think
did
any
that.
of the Finance Committee were expressing an interest in just their streets.
Yeah, so, no, there is a process.
Which brings up Birch Hill Road.
But it hasn't been moving along as quickly as I would like it
We'll
to,
we'll
so.
get something,
Thank you.
I'll make sure it's,
I appreciate the town administrator and the chair's attention to this.
But on that, you know, I'd just be more interested in finding out if we don't give Mike some of the money back, what isn't gonna get done, which is the same thing.
I concur with
That's-
right, and all I'm saying is when we first talked about it, there was nothing that he stated to me that had been planned, and he was gonna put together the specs and plans and all. He's got a long list.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
always there about, you know,
But, and that's exactly the point, because all, the stuff on that list will just end up getting
right,
pushed
so
back
that,
another
what he
year or
does
two,
is he
but-
prioritizes.
Right.
And at the moment, he thought the priority was Lower Village and getting it done. And I think that was a good choice, but that's probably changed, and even if he weren't interested, to the extent that he would go forward asking for, if there are others who wanna advocate to put Chapter 90 back in, then I'll plug it in the budget, whatever that amount is, and we'll raise the taxes to get them there. I mean, so-
Mike is a team player, no, but we also have to take the broader view.
The broader view is that at the point I talked to him, he didn't have grand plans for the money, that's why we
Right.
took it. If he had already, I'm not that reckless in what I do, that if he had, Bill, I've already got these projects lined up, please don't take it, I
Right.
wouldn't have taken it.
And I have to say that to the extent he's talked about this at Complete Streets, he sent the same message there. That he didn't have any particular, he could go another year and not have any terrible effects. He may have had a different message at Finance Committee, and maybe things have changed.
Look, everything else being equal, of course you want your money back.
Right.
But anyway, so we'll start a process, see what ends up, and I'll plug the number in. Okay, so, basically to finish up the tax recap items, the big number there is our pension. That's fixed, it's uncontrollable, put it in. And if you go to the last page, it will show you that number, which I think it's an 8.7% increase. So that's approaching $1 million a year. So bottom line, what I'm showing you now, total expenditures $32,315,122, a 6.45% increase over this year. I think when we're done, we're in the fives, and if we can do anything with the capital planning committee, we get down even further, but I don't know, because I'm hopeful one more adjustment with the school, some further adjustment that I make, and then if we can do a few things with capital, maybe just delay some, because that's the big number that we might be able to control there. In any event, we can fund this. Certain parts of it are tight. One particularly, our biggest number is I've never seen in my 27+ years here. And I was gracious in my thanks and profusely telling the superintendent, this is the third straight year that, and I think I've said it before, when they said, how can we help? They meant it, and they're gonna come in with a budget of, say, at around 3%. And it was 4% I mean, I'm just saying, we didn't have this for many years. And we seem to have it now, and as long as the train's running, I say jump on it, you know? I mean, obviously at some point you can't, but they're at least attempting to manage control of their growth to assist the towns. And they ask and they work the target numbers.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
All right.
Any final questions for Bill?
No, this was very nicely done, I liked it. Every year you do a great job.
Yeah, I echo that, and I think actually this, I liked having this combined with your State of the Town thing, which I thought went pretty well. It's got a very good substantive discussion going there. So I was pleased with that whole thing. Thank you. So next on our agenda is, I think, the appointment of a highway employee. And we have Derek Hopper. We have, well, you have materials that are confidential, so don't refer to them. And we have things to review.
So we have a recommendation from Mike Clayton.
We have a recommendation from Mike. It is a position that I think's been open for a while. And do I have a motion?
To consider it, I would like to hear from Mr. Ryan.
I haven't actually talked to Mike about this, but I know it's getting harder and harder to find people that are willing to do, I'll call it a thankless job, going out in the middle of the night and plowing. So if, Mike's done pretty good picking people in the past, and, I support it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ryan. Do I have a motion?
So move that we hire Dennis Hopper for the planning, for the highway department.
Derek Hopper. I think
Derek Hopper.
I think Dennis Hopper. I think I saw a few of his movies.
He slipped quite a bit if he's a.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a B actor, but.
My brother knew him.
Oh, well.
Motion been made, and, well, did I have a second? I didn't hear a second. Motion made and seconded to hire Derek Hopper as a driver laborer for the highway department. For discussion, seeing, hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, that is unanimous. A couple of documents we should take care of, we'll review and consider. One is a short memo that I did on strategic plan, actually, let's take up the annual report first, cause we looked at that last time. So Maureen has a draft of the Selectmen's annual report, it's marked February 15th. I had one edit, Maureen, I gave you that edit.
Yep,
Lower-
I didn't
lower-
do it
right.
on this version, but I have it in my computer.
The Lower Village Subcommittee, the Lower Village Revitalization Subcommittee is not a subcommittee of this board, we didn't create it, so I just take that out. And that was my only comment.
I gave the chair my thoughts. He can do with them what he pleases.
Actually, they did not translate electronically, so if you have something, well, I'm not your messenger boy, Brian, if you got comments, give it to Maureen. Did you give them to Maureen?
No, I didn't wanna be, intrusive that way. I just gave them to you for what, I guess you don't have Word,
I got a copy of this, I thought you were saying, this is the document I got.
it would have comments and and track changes. If you didn't get it, I'll see if I can find it.
Okay.
But it would, you'd have to look at it maybe in Word review.
Okay, give your comments to Maureen if you have. Do we wanna kick this again?
I mean,
So-
my comments were mostly cosmetic, wordsmithing, but
Just give them to Maureen if you wanna make them.
And you can ignore Brian if you want to.
yeah.
Yes.
That's standard, that's SOP, right?
So what do we wanna do? Do we wanna approve this or kick it so Brian can make his comments?
I did make my comments, but obviously they weren't reviewed. I thought you said, you got an email back to me saying, oh, hum.
No, you said, I think you said got it, and I said that's it. Cause I thought you.
I think you said, I think that's
It
it,
doesn't.
which I thought meant, okay, that's it.
You know, I was overall pretty good with this, you know, the only, it's chicken stuff. I just came up with, for the first half of the year, and then it says on May 16th. So it wasn't the first half of the year, so first part of the year.
So
like
I'm
I say,
fine
chicken stuff.
if Brian and Tom are gonna represent that the changes aren't substantive, I'm fine with approving this pending them forwarding suggested changes to Maureen. And you can make them if you think they fit. How's that?
I have
Yeah,
one
I-
question.
Yes.
So, on the last page, you talk about the different committees that members are involved in. And then in the front page, you talk about how we worked with SMOT. So the question is, should SMOT be one of the committees also in the last page, or is SMOT not a committee? I didn't know why that one. Or
The
the
last
recreation or.
page was supposed to highlight individual committees on which we served. So I think it would be a good idea to say Ingeborg Hegeman is a long-serving member of the Conservation Commission and a member of SMOT.
Yeah, just because that's a mandate,
Mhm.
so it's not like a.
We were just, this was not meant to be an exhaustive list.
Oh, okay.
This was
sorry.
just meant to give,
Just-
it's meant to show people that we do stuff other than these bi-weekly meetings.
And my thought on that was, it's unnecessary. If people wanna see what we do, they can look at the bylaws, our charters. but
Oh, no.
don't
Well,
list
do
all
you
this
want
up.
it in or not?
I was gonna suggest it out, but I leave that I mean, these were just suggestions. Do what you guys want.
Why should you make things harder to find, Brian?
Hmm?
It makes it harder to find. I'm ready to your suggestion.
Yeah, so can I have a motion to approve this,
Subject.
subject to, non-substantive changes being forwarded to Maureen for wordsmithing?
I will make a motion to accept the 2019 draft of the Selectmen's Annual Report, subject to minor perfecting modifications.
That's the phrase. Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the February 15th draft of the Selectmen's Annual Report, subject to, what was it, minor?
Minor
mo-
perfecting.
Minor perfecting, I got that.
Modifications.
Modifications. Further discussion?
As opposed to major perfecting.
Yes.
Right. If it's
See-
major, we had to vote. We gotta-
Seeing and
Just
hearing
put
none, all
perfecting
those in
in.
favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. You
Aye.
didn't get this?
I don't recall it, no.
Well, you said, I
looked-
think that's it, in your email response.
Yes, because I thought you were confused about the date, because you didn't, it doesn't really matter.
I think we've already voted on it. What-
Yes, we already
Yeah, I
voted on it.
know, okay, I have to send it again.
If you have your edits here,
Well, I'd have to leave my cell phone.
You can't email them on your cell phone?
No, I will,
You can email us.
yeah, okay.
Hopefully you can.
Just forward them to Maureen. I think I wasn't expecting to review your edits, and I don't wanna review your edits, just send them to Maureen if they're really just grammatical and stuff. So the only other, document was I had drafted a policy that's in here, I think, yeah, it's a one-page thing before the annual report. So back with all the discussions we had had about strategic planning, we wanted to do a few things, one of which was to set up this strategic planning meeting that Bill referred to, chair of the FinCom, chair of the Board of Selectmen, chair of capital planning, and the town administrator. And one of the things we talked about at one of our first meetings was we really ought to write this down and make it an actual policy and a procedure, and when we're gonna do it, when we're gonna get together, and what the point of it is. So this was my attempt at that. Bill reviewed it, was good with it, correct? I'm not putting words in your mouth.
Right.
Comments, we don't have to vote this tonight, if you wanna take a closer look at it.
No, I think it's really pretty much what's been going on for years. I'm not 100% sure it needs to be enshrined on paper, but I suppose it doesn't hurt.
I think what's new, as far as I know, there haven't been meetings between these four entities on a regular basis. So that, I will say it has been beneficial to have this happen. Everybody has been, well, you saw the result. I mean, everybody gets on the same page. Everybody knows what's going on. Just at our last meeting, Steve Jelinek realized something else was going on that affected a number he had. It gives the FinCom an opportunity to ask questions as they come up. It gives me a sense of where they are. I think it helps Bill, it helps issues bubble up for him. Really the only thing, you're right, these four issues, being important issues, that's not new. But having a regular set of meetings to talk about it is new. Mr. Burke.
Mr. Chair, I think you'd feel more comfortable with these in place. I think that's the kind of thing you like to do, is nibble things out and write things out. And I'm all for making the comfort level of the chair as high as possible, so I move to accept the policy.
That was a little, I appreciate the sentiment, I guess. So to make me feel better.
Does it?
Well, here's the question for the board. Do you think this sort of thing should continue? If you don't, if it doesn't matter to you, then don't vote it. If it was just something that helped us through this year, but it doesn't really matter that these four entities get together, then
Well, I don't think, especially if you found it useful, if Bill found it useful, if Steve found it useful, I think it's worth writing it down. And, another board can always say, we don't need to do this.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if we at least put it in place now, it'll give people some time to think about it. And you've been involved in it more than I have, so I'm willing to take your word for it.
Well, and it might be re-entitled a best practice or something,
Yeah.
if policy is,
Right. And don't forget, this all came about because there was, there were requests that we engage in more strategic planning, but not many usable suggestions about what strategic planning meant. And this is meant to put some kind of a practical side on that.
To Bill's point, as far as being a best practice type thing, I'm still caught up on something that Chief Landry had mentioned years ago. Policy is something you will do. Guidelines are something that are a good idea to do, but you can kind of work with them. So maybe I might feel a little more comfortable if you said that they were strategic policy guidelines.
Sure.
You know,
That's all.
and the thing is, that way, you're not necessarily locking somebody into doing it exactly this way, but
I
it
would-
gives people a way to think about it.
I think if you use policy guidelines, that's a contradiction in terms.
No.
So I would just put strategic planning guidelines
Yeah.
or best practices or,
Yeah.
you know.
We'll just say guidelines instead
Strategic
of
planning
policy.
guidelines.
Instead of policy. That's fine.
You know.
And then the first sentence changes to the goal of these guidelines. I can redraft this. I'll make these small edits, assuming it gets voted.
Subsequently, I found it spot on. And it's been working in the meetings we've held.
It has been working.
Then I move to accept the Town Administrator Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, Capital Planning Committee, Strategic Planning Guidelines with minor perfecting modifications by the chair.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept the strategic planning guidelines with minor edits from the chair. Further discussion?
I thought it was great to have the presentation tonight, and I think it's a good idea.
Thank you.
The board
Uh,
presentations, I thought that was great.
Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and so I'll make those slight edits and then we'll put this wherever guidelines and policies go. We'll know where that is.
Where the sun doesn't shine.
Right, so, and that brings us to, correspondence. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at correspondence?
I did, but the only thing that I was gonna mention, because Don Hawks is in here, is this is very interesting, and I guess we got an email on this golf course planning session. Planning board is gonna have something like that on March 5th. That's worth mentioning to the town.
Planning board's having a golf course planning session on March 5th at 7 PM. And I know several of us are attending. There was something in there about the Gleasondale Bridge. I guess they're getting ready to
Yep.
start work or think about starting work. I was thinking, Bill, I was gonna ask Maureen to put that on an upcoming agenda. Do you think that's unnecessary, or just to have a more?
Starting work, they're continuing the design phase.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
and we have to get back to them in
That was
30 days?
misnomered. I think they were talking about Box Mill Road Bridge. The one that I saw, and we've gotta come to an agreement on terms on what kind of bridge is constructed,
Oh,
and we've got a
I could have
difference.
sworn it said Gleasondale Road, but you might be right.
I think it did. I think it also mentioned something about multiple towns that weren't involved in it.
All I will tell you that our Gleasondale Bridge is still in design phase, so it's
Uh,
not going.
Then never mind that whole thing. I think you're right. I think it was the Box Mill Bridge. I think they might have called it Gleasondale.
Yeah, there was a misnomer somewhere. I remember looking at it going, boy, they didn't.
Never mind.
Okay, because I thought somehow, something got accelerated, so, okay,
Yeah, I do too.
okay, good, thank you. That takes care of that, and, do we need the, services of the, town administrator any longer, or can we send him on his merry way to the friendly town? I don't see what we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bill?
Thank you, Bill, great job.
Great job tonight, thank you.
Right.
Liaison reports, why don't we start with Brian.
Eeny, meeny, mo. Tick-tock, tick-tock.
I'll be very, I miss council on aging, but I am continuing to try and meet with finance whenever possible. And the ZBA's got some stuff coming up, but nothing to report.
The CPC was considering a stone wall project at the Brookside Cemetery. They're probably going, they have approved spending some money, about $15,000, I think, to redo the bridge. But they're making a point that they're not gonna spend any money in CPC funds on erosion control or tree removal surrounding it. They think that that would more appropriately come from somewhere else. They have been having some discussions about rescinding a $46,000 item from almost 10 years ago concerning Track Road. It does have to get rescinded because the original purpose, which was to make it part of ARRT, the Aspen River Rail Trail, that can't happen. Complete Streets, Jesse, Planning Board, have some ideas about Track Road, not as part of Aspen River Rail Trail, but just to improve it. Wanted to ask CPC to hold off on rescinding that money. They agreed to hold off, but they're going to rescind it in the fall, if they don't hear something about plans going forward. I think that's a good idea. I think it'll prompt people to take some action. Lower Village Subcommittee met. You've all seen the articles in the paper about water in Lower Village. That is gonna be, that's an underlying issue. The debate seems to be going in the right direction, you know, about how can the town help the businesses help themselves, as opposed to getting in the water business. But we'll see where that goes. That's it.
I've got nothing today.
Okay, and Ingeborg?
I have nothing.
Well, then I will accept the motion.
Mr.
Oh.
Point of information, should we go back into executive session to approve the minutes?
That's what I was just gonna bring up. I think we can do that. We forgot to do the minutes.
Well, we didn't forget, we ran out of time, and it was already on the agenda, so.
I forgot. So,
I think we
would
ran out of
everyone
time.
mind if we just took a few minutes and went back into executive session? So I'll accept a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of approving planning board, or for the purpose of approving executive session minutes.
So moved.
We will not be coming out of executive session and going into open session, and a public discussion would be detrimental because the minutes reflect things that were discussed in executive session. This is a roll call vote. Ms. Hageman?
Aye.
Mr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Burke? Wait, I said Mr. Ryan, and I did,
And
I
you
said-
Aye, aye, aye,
also-
aye, aye,
oh,
aye.
You didn't
aye,
get a
And I
second.
said aye. We're in executive session.
You didn't get a second.
Can we go on?